Tonight on Localite with John Compton, Glenn Lamb carves out some time to share the story behind the Columbia Land Trust. Now an organization with over 18,000 acres of protected land, Glenn was there at the beginning as the trust was founded and organized. That's all coming up next on Localite.
Glenn Lamb, thanks for coming in. It's good to have you and nice to meet you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure having you here. Let's talk about what the Columbia Land Trust is and what is your role in it.
Sure. Columbia Land Trust is a private nonprofit group whose purpose is to conserve the great places here in the Northwest. And I'm the executive director.
Okay. So you guys actually purchase land or get people together to purchase land?
And also people give us land as a gift. What we've really done is tried to reach out to those private landowners who have a real conservation interest and help them craft a conservation strategy. And in many cases, people donate land because they want to know that that place will be in that condition for all time, and they entrust it to us.
Okay. So a little context around what that is and what you do. How did you get into this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I first moved to the Northwest in 1983 through running. In fact, I went to high school with a fellow named Alberto Salazar, who was a world record holder in the marathon. And
Really?
He went to the University of Oregon, and after he graduated, and after I graduated from college, I was back in the East. He said, "You got to come on out to Oregon. It's where there's great running to be had and good coaches and everything else." So I came out and started running a lot out here and just fell in love with the trails and the places, the rivers and the streams, and that was in 1983, and I haven't gone back. And in 1989, when I was living up in the Portland area, a number of us were really noticing, with the economy booming at that time, that a lot of farms and ranches and forests and places along rivers and streams that had long been enjoyed by Northwest residents were being converted to houses or no longer being available for those other uses. And
Right.
And yet we had met a lot of landowners who really wanted to keep it as a farm and a ranch and a forest. And so we thought rather than filing lawsuits against landowners to try to keep them from doing something, let's actually extend a helping hand and find those who want to enter into voluntary conservation plans. And that's what we did.
All right. So were you instrumental then in spearheading?
Yeah,
and actually...
I was one of the 12 of us that got together and said, we want a different kind of approach, and we want one that's respectful of private landowners, and so
That's what you did.
that's what we did.
And it's done well.
Oh man, John, it's just been so inspiring. We had a vision and a dream that people like that would want to conserve their land. And the first 10 years we were all volunteer, and I got to tell you, that's a really hard way to go. We worked with 3 or 4 landowners that had very inspiring stories, but fitting it in just in the evenings and weekends was a hard thing. But since 1999, we've had paid staff doing this in addition to all the volunteers. And we've had now more than 150 landowners comprising 18,000 acres from here in the Dalles all the way to the ocean in both Oregon and Washington that have stepped forward. So there's some amazing stories out there and really inspiring people.
So who are the people that are doing this? The ones, because you said some people give the land, so like in maybe a will or something like that. Do they find you? Do you find them?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. We have identified places that have the most important values in the Columbia Gorge and along our wild and scenic rivers, including the Klickitat River and the Hood River and all the way down in the Columbia Estuary and our biggest private forest lands and remaining old growth forests and things of that nature. So we've identified those areas, and we reach out to landowners in that area, and we find many landowners do have a conservation interest and want to work with us. But also, every week we pick up the phone and there's someone calling us from a place that we hadn't identified as a priority that says, hey, you got to come out here and look at what we've got, and we want to help conserve it. So
is there a specific footprint that you guys, is it just the Columbia Gorge out to the coast?
The best way to describe it, we say, is from where the John Day River flows into the Columbia all the way out to the ocean in both Oregon and Washington, probably 50 miles back on both sides of the river. So it's along the Columbia, but along the tributaries encompassing the entire Portland, Vancouver metropolitan area, and encompassing from, say, Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams to Mount Hood and all the way out to the coast. So.
Really? So this land, once it's been donated or purchased, what happens to it then?
Yeah. With every property, when we first start talking with the landowner, we end up looking at the property with them and identifying what their wishes are. And we begin crafting a management plan, an objective for what's going to happen with the land. So I'm thinking of Dory Brooking as one example. She and her husband Brooke, he grew up in Indiana in the 1920s and had never been out to the west. And he ended up moving out here as a doctor. And he would drive along the Columbia River between Camas and Vancouver on his way to work. And he kept looking out at the Columbia when he would go by. And I remember he told me at one point, he said, "Glenn, they don't have anything like that in Indiana." And because there's a view straight out to Mount Hood and it's fabulous property. And so he and Dory ended up, you talk to them. And this is, what happens when a landowner calls. And Dory will look you in the eye and she'll say, "Glenn, people have got to get out here to see this." And so they saved all of their money and got mortgages and acquired 20 acres on the Columbia River for the outrageous sum of $17,000 in 1950. And they held on to it and they raised their 8 kids. They didn't have a house on that property, but they camped, they fished, they swam, they got a sailboat. They later built a sailboat. They later sailed to Tahiti on that sailboat with 4 of their kids. And,
incredible.
And then in the end, the kids were all gone, and Dory and Brooke looked at that land, and they really felt like they weren't the owners of it. They were just the caretakers of it and wanted to pass it along to the next generation. So they got every single one of the 8 kids wrote Mom and Dad a letter saying, "You need to donate this land for conservation." And when they did, it was worth $1.5 million, their $17,000 property. Wow. And so Dory had this vision for people needed to get to this property. So that influences our future management objectives of the property. So every property comes with a story like that, with a landowner who has some dream, and we try to help make that dream come true. And we also then will look at the condition of the property, if there's invasive species and other management challenges that we want to take care of. And our goal is to have Mother Nature sort of just working in the way that she normally would, and not to have us have to have a heavy hand on managing these places.
So try to basically leave it the way that you almost inherited.
Yeah,
in a sense.
I think that's a wonderful way to describe it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about this when we come back. Take another quick break, or we'll take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll keep talking about the Columbia Land Trust. Glenn Lamb.
Coming up.
And that is a value that every Oregonian, Washingtonian shares, every Northwesterner shares. If you're Republican, if you're Democrat, the value, and there's a pride, it's part of our personality, I think, that we're from this place.